Welcome in to another episode of the Gridiron Fantasy Show. I'm your host, Paul Edgington. You can find me on X at Gump7285, coming at you with another Wednesday night betting episode for the upcoming slate for college football and the NFL. Here tonight, I'm going to give you one prop from each NFL game and one prop from each of the nationally televised college football games. So going to hand out about 35, 40-ish props here on this episode. So we'll dive right into it on the NFL side of things. Thursday night football with the Jets and Patriots. This one's going to be ugly. Patriots have looked so, more so better on the defensive side of the ball. The offense has been a struggle, as we should expect, and the Jets haven't looked too hot either on the offensive side. The over-under, I believe, is set at 37.5, 38.5 right now. So expecting a lot of low scoring. I'm not really touching any anytime touchdown props in this one just because of the expectancy of the low scoring output. So my favorite prop from this game is Aaron Rodgers to go under his passing yards of 215.5. As you can see here on YouTube, so far 167 and 176 through the first two games. And we know the Patriots defense is pretty good, at least middle of the road at worst, I would say. So far, they've allowed 208 passing yards per game, but the Jets and Aaron Rodgers so far have not looked very good passing the ball. As we can see here, Rodgers threw the ball 21 times and 30 times last week versus the Titans. Completed 13 and 18 of his passes. So it's not looking too hot for Mr. Rodgers so far this year. I believe his yards per attempt is less than 6 yards. So he's not pushing the ball downfield, nor probably should he be at this age, considering coming off an Achilles tear. His air yards 74 and 80. So just not really a fan of Aaron Rodgers going over. I think this line is giving us a pretty nice cushion for him to hit the under 215, but yet he has hit 176 at most this year. So I think this one's a pretty smash bet for me. And we'll take a look at the next game of the Chargers and Steelers. So I am going to take a look at the resurgence of J.K. Dobbins and his over for his rushing yards, 135 and 131 for the first two games of the season. So he has had a hell of a season. Now, Pittsburgh's rush defense, they're allowing 115 per game this year. So not the best, not the worst. Ranks them 19th. So about slightly over middle of the road for that. But J.K. is the best performing back. Gus Edwards, I think, has 2 or 3 more rushing attempts on the year. So not much at all, but when J.K. gets the ball, he is producing pretty much every touch, very efficient. He's only had 10 and then 17 rush attempts last week. So he's doing a lot with a little. And here we are, 61 and 43 are his longest rushes. He is getting plenty of yards after contact, 71 and then 86 last week. So he is playing very well, especially coming off, the Achilles, the ACL, everything he's went through. It is very surprising to see him play this well, especially this early on in the season. Now, moving on to the next game, we'll take a look at the New York Giants and Cleveland Browns. Last week on the show, I did pick Malik Neighbors to go over his receiving yards, and we're going right back to that well. As we see here, 66 and 127 through each of the first two games. It looks like the best line right now is 64.5. And looking here what Props.cash has pulled, I'm perfectly fine taking the 64.5. I don't think he's going to have any problem getting that, as he had a monstrous 18 targets last week. I think he'll get another 10-plus targets this week. He is the number one in the offense, as we expected him to be. He did have that one bad drop on the sideline on fourth down for the Giants, unfortunately. But other than that, he has looked spectacular so far, and he's really I guess, coming into his own now. He has hit this prop both games, and it is the Cleveland Browns. They are struggling offensively for the most part, so I'm expecting him to hit this line once again. Our next prop will be another receiving yards prop, this time for the Texans and the Minnesota Vikings. Looking at the alpha in the offense, Mr. Nico Collins to go over 72.5, 117 and 135 in the first two games. It's clear he is the number one target for CJ Stroud. 8 targets and 10 targets, 6 receptions and 8. So he is catching majority of the balls thrown his way. And it is the Vikings. So let's scroll back up here. The Vikings defense, they're allowing the 24th. They're ranked 24th in pass yards at 234 per game. And at CJ Stroud, we know he's going to sling that ball around, but a majority of them are going to go to Nico Collins. So I absolutely love this line. I know I will be laddering myself up to 100 yards, probably taking the standard 72.5, 80, 90, and 100 plus. So I absolutely love him this week. Now we will take a look at a game that I'm not too excited for. The Denver Broncos and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Over under right now is set at 40. So not too high, not too low, kind of right there in the middle. But I'm going to be looking at Baker Mayfield's passing yards right now is set at 241.5. He had 289 and 185 weeks 1 and 2. And Denver gives up a little over 230 per game. Looks like so far this year, Geno Smith hit 171. No, so that can't be right then. Absolutely not. Geno had 171, and then Justin Fields only had 117. So clearly they're giving up less than 233 per game. So that is off. But I'm taking Baker on the under. He did struggle against the Lions, didn't even hit 200. So the Broncos defense, Patrick Surtain, a pretty decent defense. I know Justin Fields is, Justin Fields, but Geno Smith is better than Justin Fields, and he still couldn't hit the 200-yard mark. So I'm going to go ahead and take Baker for under 241.5 in this one. In the next one, we got a little bit of a revenge storyline narrative with Malik Willis starting against his former team, the Tennessee Titans. And I don't think it's going to be a pretty happy homecoming for him in this one. I'm taking his under passing yards at 148.5. He only had 122 last week against the Colts. And his pass attempts, he only threw 14, while he did complete 12 of them. Throwing the ball 14 times, it's not very good, even though they do have the weapons in Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks. They just want to turn around and hand the ball off to Josh Jacobs, and that's not the worst plan in the world either. So I'm going to take his under. I just don't think the passing volume is going to be there for him to hit the over on this one. And then one of the matchups of the week, the Philadelphia Eagles and the New Orleans Saints. This one will hopefully have lots of points scored. It looks like right now, let's see what that total is set at. That total is 49.5 right now on DraftKings. And my favorite play from this one is going to be a touchdown for Mr. Raheed Shaheed. The Eagles are one of, if not the worst, defensive backfields in the NFL today. They give up lots of big plays over their heads, and we've seen so far Shaheed be used on end rounds, reverses, screen passes in the short game. So he doesn't necessarily need to outrun you down the field to get a touchdown. So I'm going to go ahead with Shaheed's anytime touchdown on this one. And let's take a look at the battle of the Bears and the Indianapolis Colts. I don't really have, one that blows me away in this one. Jonathan Taylor set at 71.5 rushing yards. Isn't terrible. It looks like for running backs, last week against when they played the Texans, They kind of held him in check. 25 for Joe Mixon, 32 for Cam Akers, but all around that was just a pretty ugly game for both sides of the ball. But in week 1 against the Titans, Tony Pollard got 82 by himself. But I'm not completely sold on Jonathan Taylor. So I'm going to go ahead and take Anthony Richardson for over 40.5 rush yards against the Chicago Bears. He had 56 and then 37. So he just missed this line to go 2 for 2 on the season. And they even allowed Will Levis to get 36 rush yards in week 1. So if he can get 36, I see no reason to think Anthony Richardson can't get at least 41 for it. Next up will be the Dolphins and Seahawks. Another game I'm not really too high on. Just no Tua. Skylar Thompson's going to be the starter. Thankfully for him, he is going to have a week of practice. But still, that offense is going to be looking a lot different without Tua back there slinging the ball around. So Geno Smith's passing yards is set at 240.5 right now. But the Dolphins' defense so far this year, 162 to T-Law and 139 to Josh Allen. So I'm staying away from Skylar Thompson completely, even for the unders. I'm not a big fan of those for him because you just never know with the weapons. A pop pass to Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Achane can go for a lot of yards and it could quickly kill the slip on that one. So I am looking at Devon Achane, however, whichever way you prefer to pronounce it. His rushing yards are set at 71.5. And the New England Patriots absolutely tore them a new one last week. Good old Antonio Gibson had 96 and Ramondre had 81. So this is potentially a good play, but I am looking at his rushing and receiving yards. It is a higher line at 92.5, of course. But again, a screenplay, a check down to Achane could go for a lot of yards. So I think I'm going to take his rushing and receiving for over 92.5 against the Seahawks. That seems like the best bet in this game for me. The next one is going to come from the Las Vegas Raiders. And my dynasty tight end, number 1, Brock Bowers. We're going to take his over in the receiving yards at 45.5 right now. He is heavily involved in this offense, 8 targets and 9 targets. 6 receptions and 9, so he caught all of his targets last week against the Baltimore Ravens. Just an absolute stud so far. His air yards are ridiculous for a tight end, 42 and 56. So I absolutely love this for him. It was set at, I think 35, 38.5 last week is what I got it for on the show. So definitely bumped up a lot, but I think he's good for at least 50. I'll probably be laddering this from 45.5, probably up to 70, 80. As we saw last week, if he gets fed the targets, he is going to make something happen. Now, most of these are going to be on DraftKings, potentially Fanatics. For whatever reason, as I'm sitting here recording, FanDuel does not have out really shit for lines for the Sunday games, which is unfortunate. Definitely delayed compared to last week. But we'll move on to the Lions and Cardinals game, and I'm going to stick with an anytime touchdown in this one with David Montgomery. They get inside that 5-yard line. We know exactly where that ball is going, right in the gut of David Montgomery. In the red zone, he's had 4 rush attempts and 3 to start out the season. So he inside that 5, it's David Montgomery time. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one, and Fanatics is the best odds at 115.5 at the. Now, what I'm sure is going to be America's game of the week on Fox, the Baltimore Ravens traveling to the Dallas Cowboys. I think this game could go either way. It could be a fun one. It could be a close one. Who knows with the way the Cowboys looked last week. It's a toss-up. And I'm going to go ahead and take a peek at Lamar's rushing yards, set at 53.5 right now. We did hear before, John Harbaugh, the plan isn't to give Derrick Henry 30 carries. Lamar's not going to get as many carries as he saw against the Chiefs week in and week out. but 53.5 seems like a pretty good line. Of course, they've only faced Deshaun Watson, Derek Carr, and the misfits of Taysom Hill. So I'm not sure how I feel about this one, but it seems decent enough. But I think I'm going to go ahead and roll with King Henry. As we saw what the Saints did last week with Alvin Kamara, his ridiculous touchdown game, and he also dropped 115 on the ground as well. In the week one, Jerome Ford did have 44 against them as well, but that was a blowout for the Cowboys. So take that for what you will, but I'm going to ride with the King at over 66.5 rushing yards in Dallas. Now going down to Hotlanta as they welcome Patty Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. We know now Hollywood Brown is out for the season. Isaiah Pacheco is out for a good chunk of the season, potentially could miss all of it. So maybe Travis Kelce, he might rise from the dead in the regular season, 34 and 5 receiving yards. He's set at 48.5 right now. I want to take it. I love me some Travis Kelce, but I just don't know. It's without Pacheco, most people are assuming he's going to get more of the work, especially in the short area, kind of an extension of the run game as they figure out who is going to step up in Pacheco's place. But I'm rocking with the stud, Bijan Robinson, much like Achane. I love the over for the rushing and receiving combo at 105.5. He's hit this line both times, 111, 122. And then let's see, no odds for that one on KC. But he is getting a pretty hefty workload, as was rumored in the offseason. 18 rush attempts and then 14 last week. He's also seen 5 targets in each game. This offense goes as Bijan goes so far. Kirk Cousins is still looking very rusty coming off the Achilles. I don't know what the hell they're doing with Kyle Pitts. Same with Drake London. He did have a great end to the game on Monday night, but up until that point, he was a complete disappointment. So Bijan Robinson is the whole damn show for Atlanta, and I'm going to try to ride him to another cash. This week, we're lucky enough and get treated to 2 Monday night football games. The first one at 7:30 Eastern Time is the Jacksonville Jaguars making the trip up to Buffalo. This one I'm not a big fan of for prop betting purposes. Josh Allen, as we saw against the Dolphins, if they get a big lead, he's not going to throw the ball. He's not really going to run the ball. And we saw what James Cook did, an absolute monster game. I'm going to ride with him again. His rushing and receiving yards over 84.5, 103 and 95. So 2 of 2 hit rate so far, 19 rush attempts and 11 rush attempts, 3 targets. And then last week he only saw the 1 target, but still he can do enough on the ground to get over 84.5 just solely on the ground. So I don't mind taking both. Let's see what the difference is with his rushing yards alone. His rushing yards is 63.5, but he's only had 71 and 78. So I'm going to stick with the rushing and receiving yards for James Cook. As we know, he is a dual threat running back. And as we saw last week, he had 1 catch, but it looks like it was a 17-yarder. So that's all he needs sometimes is just to catch the ball in the backfield 1 time, and he's good to go. To the second Monday night game, my Cincinnati Bengals kicking off at 8:15 Eastern Time look to get back on track. Last week, I bet against Joey B on his under passing yards. He soared over that by about 20, 25-ish yards. They are playing the Washington Commanders. The Bengals should control this game. They should win it. But no matter the game script, they're throwing the ball 60, 70% of the time, each and every week, whether they're winning, whether they're losing, no matter what. This run game is not very good at this point. So they are relying on Joe Burrow's arm, and I'm going to go ahead and take his over 265.5. Last week, 258 against the Chiefs, stout defense. Almost hit it, but he did throw the ball 36 times. He threw the ball 29 times in week 1. Just really couldn't get it going against the Patriots, but I think Joey B is going to cash us out at this one and hit at least 266. So that's it for the NFL. One prop from each game. So now we'll turn the page and take a look at college football. First up, we have a game on Thursday night. We have App State playing South Alabama. This should be all App State. And I'm looking at their quarterback, Joey Aguilar. Very, very good college quarterback. I'm going to take an alt line on him. I'm going to take his 300 passing yards, 300 plus. I got it today at a plus 100 on DraftKings. So as we can see here, 326 week 1, 214 against Clemson week 2, and 424 last week against East Carolina. So he does throw the ball a whole hell of a lot. 67 completion percentage, 36, 41, 47 passing attempts. So it is the Joey Aguilar show, and I am fully confident he's going to soar over the 300, potentially 350. This should be a high-scoring affair, and I absolutely love Joey Aguilar on Thursday night. And then on, Friday night, or is this? Yep, Friday night, we also have Stanford and the Syracuse Orangemen. I always get a little nervous betting rushing yards, particularly on the over for college quarterbacks, because their sack yardage comes from their rushing yards. So let's say they have 15 rush yards, but they get sacked for a loss of 8. 15 minus 8 is 7. Then they're sitting at 7 rush yards. But Ashton Daniels is a very capable runner. Syracuse should be in control of this game and win this one with no issues. So Ashton Daniels, if he is going to keep the Stanford Cardinal in the game, is going to have to use his legs. He had 17 attempts week 1 and 9 rushing attempts week 2, 87 week 1 and 31 week 2. Right now he's set at 33.5. I absolutely love that line for him. What should be a good game script for him to get out and run, as the ball should be in his hands for majority of the game. And then we have a battle of 2 ranked Big Ten teams, Illinois traveling to Lincoln, Nebraska at 8 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night. I'm rocking with Dylan Raiola, over 217.5 passing yards. He's hit this line 2 or 3 times. The only one was against Colorado. He did not. But most of us know how that game went. Nebraska was up early, and they absolutely controlled that game. So him throwing the ball around a lot just was not needed whatsoever. But he did actually pass the ball 30 times, the most he has this year. But once they got up, the defense really settled in, and it was pretty much just run the ball, milk that clock, and try to get out of there. Illinois is the best defense he's played this year. But a true freshman, he does get the advantage of being at home for his first Big Ten game. I think he's an absolute stud. So I'm going to rock with him to hit the over 217.5. Then we have a battle of ACC teams, NC State and Clemson, on Saturday at noon. So let's see what they got going on over there. Let's take a look at the receiving yards. Kevin Concepcion has really fallen off each and every week. Had that big game week 1 where it was a competitive game. They battled against Western Carolina. But each week he's gone down even further and even further. Only 25 last week against Louisville. I don't love that. My tight end 3 in this 2025 draft cycle is NC State tight end Justin Jolie. His line right now is 31.5. He's had 75, 30, and 48. So he's hit this one 2 out of 3 times, and this is going to be my prop for this game. They do have a true freshman quarterback, CJ Bailey, looks to be starting for the injured Grayson McCall. So I think this is going to be his guy, his safety valve, more so than Kevin Concepcion. So I'm rocking with Justin Jolie for over 31.5. Now we'll look at a battle in the Big 12 that I was excited for before the season, but both teams have not performed the best It is Kansas and West Virginia. It should still be a good game nonetheless, but I'm rocking with an anytime touchdown for CJ Donaldson. This is an auto play for me every single week. Last season, he hit this 10 of 12 games. This year so far, he is 3 of 3. So I am going to stick with the big guy, and he should just keep chugging along against the Kansas Jayhawks. Still decent money, DraftKings, negative 115. So that's an absolutely stellar line for a guy that has scored in 13 of his last 15 games over the past 2 seasons. And now a game that I'm not excited about whatsoever. Florida and Mississippi State, as we have no idea who is really going to get the bulk of these snaps at quarterback for Florida between Graham Mertz and stellar freshman DJ Lagway. So there's no props up for them right now. I'm probably just going to stick with an anytime touchdown. I mean, none of them look the best. Odds-wise, Montrell Johnson is probably the most likely to hit, but his odds right now are just negative 181 on Sleeper. So not the greatest. They should also be without Eugene Wilson III, once again, relying on Elijah Badger. So without Eugene Wilson, he has been magnificent. 123 and 94 receiving yards. His line is set at 66.5 right now. So this is going to be my best bet from this one. There's really not much else out there right now. Montrell Johnson for 72.5. But as we can see here, 106 against Miami. He had a big run early in the game. 67 at Samford. And then last week, he didn't do much. So each week he is declining. The games are different week to week. They're playing merry-go-round with the quarterbacks. So it's not a pretty situation in Florida right now. So Elijah Badger seems like he was going to be the best bet on this one at over 66.5 receiving yards. Now on to Marshall and Ohio State. A home game for the Buckeyes, of course, in the shoe. This one is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to stay rolling with Jeremiah Smith if he is up. Negative 210 for an anytime touchdown as he's had 3 in 2 games. Quinshon Judkins, negative 330, and Travion, negative 220. So, nope, no receiving yard props up right now. No rushing, no passing, nothing for this game. This is going to be one that I said I was going to give a bet for every national televised game. This one's going to be a low-hanging fruit, of course. There's not much available. Even if there was, Ohio State's going to dog walk Marshall. So it's probably best for this one just to keep rolling with the true freshman Jeremiah Smith for an anytime touchdown and just take this is more of a parlay piece, pair with something else, another juice cutter to get off that negative 210 and hopefully down around negative 130, 120 at best. But he is an absolutely phenomenal prospect. He's going to be, right now, probably a top 5 pick. When his time comes in 2027, he seems to be the number 1 target for the most part in this offense. And we're going to take a look at my Michigan Wolverines welcoming USC into the Big House for their very first Big Ten game. This one is going to be very interesting. Alex Orji is making his first start of the season, replacing Davis Warren. And man, this Michigan offense just looks like absolute dog shit. Can't do anything in the receiving game. And also Colston Loveland. Still no true word yet, but at this rate, I'm going to count on him missing the game due to a shoulder injury he suffered. He hasn't hit this year, Zachariah Branch. He has not hit his over 4.5 reception prop. He's had 4 in each game, but with this Michigan defense, I think he is going to be possibly the most targeted player for USC, as Will Johnson is basically going to shut down one side of the field. So I'm going to go ahead and take his receptions over 4.5. I think he'll get 5, possibly up to 7. They're not going to be worth much. They're going to be short dink and dunk type of things like what they normally do with him, but receptions are receptions, so I'm not looking at his yards. which his yards right now are set at 46.5, which he had 19 last week and 56 against LSU. So not, with Zachariah Branch, anytime he gets the ball, he can house it and rip off a big one, but I'm going to stick with the receptions. I feel like that's a little bit of a safer play for him as they're going to run the screens, the quick passes with him as well. So let's take a look at Arkansas and Auburn. We're going to hit up the rushing yards for Jaquindon Jackson, over 87.5. I'm going to ladder him from 87.5 to 90 to 100. I think he's going to have 100-plus rushing yards against Auburn. He's had 101, 149, and 147. Just absolutely ridiculous from the former Texas quarterback and former Utah running back. He's had 8 rush attempts, 24 and 15. So whether he's getting a lot or he's getting a little, he's producing. He's soared over this number each and every week, and I expect it to be no different against the Auburn Tigers. All righty, and on to the next one. We're going to take a look at Georgia Tech and Louisville. We're going to take a look at one of my favorite sophomore wide receivers, Eric Singleton Jr., to go over 41.5 is what I got him at earlier. He's at 42.5 now. But even at 42.5, he's hit this one 3 out of 4. He's gone from 19 to 43 to 86 to 102. Each and every week, he is increasing his output, so I don't see any different against Louisville. Louisville's offense can score, so this should be a good game script for Singleton to hit the 42.5 that we're looking for. And one of the more intriguing matchups of the week, UCLA and LSU. Played down there in Baton Rouge, I believe this one will be. It won't be neutral site. UCLA had a pretty decent defense last year. This year, not so much. They're ramping up for the Big Ten. LSU has been up and down, played pretty good against USC. And then against South Carolina, they were a whole mess. Garrett Nussmeier was throwing picks everywhere. South Carolina had 2 pick-6 called back. So it was not a good day for Nuss. And then Kyron Lacey, he had that big game against USC week 1, and then since then he's kind of disappointed. 65 and 63 receiving yards. So I'm going to go ahead and click his under, which is set at 77.5 currently. They probably won't need him to have a big game to win this one, as they are the superior team over the UCLA Bruins. So I'm going to go ahead and feel pretty safe about his under 77.5 receiving yards. It looks like you can get that on FanDuel right now at negative 114. So we're going to go ahead and lock that one in. And then Miami of Ohio and Notre Dame. Doesn't look like they have anything up for this one. It's going to be a Notre Dame blowout. So right now, unfortunately, nothing because there are no lines out. Now let's take a look at Utah and Oklahoma State. Where are you at? Are they not up here either? Or maybe I'm just blind and can't see. There they are. I'm blind and can't see. But looking at this one, not a lot to love. Ollie Gordon is set at 82.5 rush yards. He had 104 week 1 and then a disappointing 49 against Arkansas and 41 against Tulane or Tulsa. I'm going to hit the under on Ollie Gordon. Surprisingly, I've been a big Ollie Gordon fan, but right now he's just not able to get going. So we're going to go ahead and take the under on that one, under 82.5. And the next game, Cal and Florida State, which promises to not be pretty whatsoever. Let's see if they have anything up for this game right now. DJU, 195.5 passing yards. He's hit the over just slightly, 2 out of 3 games. We got nothing for rushing. Malik Benson His receiving yards is set at 42.5. He's had 39, 33, and then finally blew up last week for 99. Man, there's not much for this game right now. DJU over 1.5 passing touchdowns. He's had one passing touchdown for the entire season. So this one, I think right now I'm going to stay away from because there is nothing out that I really feel comfortable betting on. Malik Benz is under, but he did emerge last week, and this one will probably be a close game with Cal if Cal is not blowing them out. And then Jackson Arnold, I did take earlier his under 274.5 passing and receiving yards combo for 114 on FanDuel. He's had for passing yards 141, 174, and 169. So he has not had a good season whatsoever. Rushing yards 34, 28, and then a whopping 97 last week against Tulane. But he has been super, super disappointing, especially for Devy players. He was in the mix for 2026 quarterback one talks coming into this year and has absolutely done jack shit other than week one against Temple. He did have 4 passing touchdowns that game. But since then, he hasn't done much, and they are welcoming Tennessee. This is the SEC opener for Oklahoma. They are underdogs at home for the first time in a long time. And I'm not buying Jackson Arnold's hype at the moment. Tennessee has a very good defense. They're ranked in the top 5 for rushing and passing yards allowed. So they will more than likely shut them down. And moving on to another Big Ten battle of not quite top 25 teams, but they are both 2-0, Iowa and Minnesota. And I love Elijah Spencer, the wide receiver for Minnesota, to go over 23.5 receiving yards. He's done it every week with 25, 55, 54. He's not getting a whole hell of a lot of targets, 2, 4, and 4, but he is a playmaker with the ball in his hands. And against Iowa's defense that should be keying in to stop the run against Darius Taylor, I think Elijah Spencer is going to be able to get out there and work in space and hit this over for us. On to Baylor and Colorado, I know I'm looking forward to this game. Baylor struggling. They got whooped by Utah. Daquan Finn, their starting quarterback, transfer from Toledo, is questionable and just might not play. So if he's not playing, it's going to be a rough day for the Baylor Bears, but it is Colorado. You never know with Colorado at this point. So I'm going back to the well with Travis Hunter, over 96.5 receiving yards. He's had no less than 100 all 3 games. He is the most targeted player in the offense. 7, 10, 13 for receptions the last 3 weeks. So Travis Hunter, 100 plus. You can pretty much pencil it in at this point. And then for our very last game, Kansas State and BYU on the road in beautiful Provo, Utah. I'm going with Dylan Edwards, anytime touchdown, the Colorado transfer. He had 2 week 1 and then 1 week 2. He did have a punt return touchdown against Arizona in week 3, but he is electrifying with the ball in his hands. He's a returner, a weapon out of the backfield. So I'm going to go ahead and take his anytime touchdown. And that wraps up all the nationally televised college football games for this week. So with that, that'll wrap up this episode. Appreciate you guys tuning in once again to me, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Would really appreciate a like and subscribe on YouTube, a rating and review on Apple Podcast, and a rating on Spotify. If you could just take a couple minutes out of your day and do that for me, it would greatly help out myself and the show. And of course, give us a follow on Twitter or X, whatever the hell you want to call it, Gump7285 or Gridiron_FS. And use my code GUMP on Sleeper for a deposit match up to $100 for your first deposit and a free 0.5 pick to try to get your bankroll started off on the right foot. And then make sure you're following me on Twitter. As I said, I do post additional bets pretty much daily at this point. I do have a weekly thread for college football and NFL, so make sure you're following me on there and checking that out. And also check out my weekly Debbie Primer that is up now on Fantasy Pros. And then I will have a weekly Dynasty Buy Sell Hold article as well, dropping either later tonight or tomorrow morning. So check out my written work on Fantasy Pros, and then also catch me on the College Football Podcast on the destination. Excuse me. Can tell we're getting to the end. Catch me every Saturday on the Destination Debbie radio feed for the College Football Podcast. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll see you this Saturday.